question period where we'll unmute folks and we'll just ask you to put your hand up. But we'll now at this point hand it over to you, Daniel, to bring up your presentation. And we very much look forward to sharing this topic with everyone.
Let me get this started. All right. Can you see it?
Yep, we're good.
Awesome. So first, I want to thank the First Three Knocks Masonic podcast for allowing me to be here tonight. And I want to thank everyone for attending to listen to this presentation. It's on two topics, one that has been very important in my life, and another one that has become very important in my life, so which is Freemasonry and Stoicism. Just to provide a preamble as to how I started this presentation and this research. At the end of last year, I was elected to become the worshipful master of my lodge. And at 26 years old, that was something that a lot of people were telling me that it would be a daunting task, just because for those who aren't familiar with what a worshipful master is, it's essentially the president of the lodge, the equivalent of the president of the lodge. So in wanting to do the job to the best of my abilities, I became interested in studying leadership and what it is that leadership entailed. And that's where I was drawn to Stoicism, because it was a school of thought that I was interested in, but I had never really immersed myself in the literature. And it was in reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, so those are his personal journal entries. It was in reading his meditations that I started noticing there were a lot of parallels between Freemasonry and Stoicism. And I want to share with you some information on an article that was released on April 16th by a journalist called Alison Flood. It was a Guardian article titled "Dress Rehearsal for Catastrophe: How Stoics Are Speaking to Lockdown Readers," right? And in the article, she explains that according to Penguin Random House's publication numbers, print sales of Meditations are up 28% for the first quarter of 2020 versus 2019, while print sales of Letters from a Stoic are up 42% for the same period. And in the last 4 weeks since the article had been released, the ebooks had actually risen by 356%. And in the last 8 years, there's been an increase, with the publisher saying that around 16,000 copies of the Meditations were sold in 2012, but this increased to more than 100,000 copies in 2019. So I'm honored, and it's a privilege to be able to share with you tonight some research that I have found in a presentation titled Hiramic Meditations: How Freemasonry Crafts a Stoic Lifestyle. So first, I just want to point out some things that we're going to be discussing tonight. So I'm going to introduce to you, make a distinction between operative and speculative Freemasonry, right? If there's anybody out there that's saying, what is Freemasonry? Who are the Freemasons, right? I'm going to introduce to you Zeno, who's considered the father of Stoicism. We're going to talk about two other Stoics from the late Stoic era, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. We're going to dive a little bit into what it is that Stoicism teaches us. We're going to look over the Masonic and Stoic virtues and how they both use the same four cardinal virtues. We're going to discuss the ashlars that are found in Freemasonry and how the narrative that's told with the ashlars is the same narrative that's told in Stoicism, in the philosopher Becoming a Stoic. And then finally, we're going to look over the 5 Stoic concepts that are expressed in Freemasonry, which are premeditatio malorum, self-control practice, Amorphati, Memento Mori, and then the act of journaling. And then finally, I'm just going to end with concluding remarks, and we're going to leave it up for question and answers. So to begin with, operative and speculative Freemasonry. So the tradition of Freemasonry, as we see it today, we call it speculative Freemasonry, and it originates from the ancient stone guilds, right? So these were the actual stonemasons that were dedicated to building these temples, right? They were the hands-on stonemasons. And Albert G. Mackey, who is arguably one of the greatest scholars of Freemasonry, right? A brother as well. He writes that operative Freemasonry is engaged in the application of the rules and principles of architecture to the construction of edifices for private and public use, houses for the dwelling place of man, and temples for the worship of the deity. But over time, these guilds weren't needed anymore, right? So then it evolved into what we now call as speculative Freemasonry, right? Where we're using these same rules, we're using the same principles and the tools, and we're applying them on a more speculative or figurative way. And instead of erecting these important buildings, we're focused on the inner spiritual building of the individual. And that's why you'll often hear that speculative Freemasonry is defined as a system of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated through symbols. And it's in speculative Freemasonry that we find the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, which I'm going to be focusing on different aspects of them tonight, right? Where we see the entered apprentice degree, the fellowcraft degree, and then the master mason degree. And collectively, all these degrees make up a story, a narrative that we call the Hiramic legend, which involves itself with the building of King Solomon's temple. And that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And there, as you can see, that's a picture of me and brother Hal Peterson, who was a secretary at our lodge for 13 years. That was on our installation earlier this year. He was actually the one that brought me into the lodge. So here we're seeing the power of speculative Freemasonry, right? So Zeno and Stoicism. Who was Zeno? So Zeno is a merchant of our Stoic story, right? Not much is known from him. We only have one account of his story, which we find in The Lives and Opinions of Eminent Philosophers by Diogenes Laertius. He was the son of a very rich merchant who sold purple dye, and he also followed in his father's footsteps, and he became a merchant himself. And it was at 22 when he became shipwrecked in Athens while he was venturing to make sales. And it was this shipwreck that forced him to question what it was that he valued in life. And it's told that he had contacted an oracle, and he had asked the oracle what it is that he needed to do in order to attain the best life that he could possibly have. And it's reported that the oracle had responded to him that by direct order of the gods, Zeno needed to adopt the complexion of the dead. So he was thinking about what it is that this could possibly mean. And he came to the conclusion that what he was being called to was to become a student of philosophy. He needed to immerse himself in the world of philosophy. So it was in Athens that he traveled to a local bookshop. And in the bookshop, he started reading a lot of philosophical texts. And he became a great admirer of Socrates. And he had asked the bookseller where it was that he could find philosophers like Socrates. And at that moment, there was a philosopher called Crates of Thebes that is said to have been walking outside of the bookshop. And then the bookseller pointed out of the door, and he's just like, that's the individual that you need to follow. That's the individual that you need to study from. So Zeno followed him out. He told him he needed to become a student, and he ended up becoming a student of his, a student of cynicism. And he also became a student of other philosophical schools. And when he felt that he was ready, he started to give his own lectures. And he would give his own lectures at a public colonnade called the Stoa Poikile. So initially, the school of thought was called Zenoism because it was named after him. But because he was giving these lectures in the public colonnade called the Stoa Poikile, it naturally evolved into being called Stoicism. And funny enough, when we think of a Stoic or Stoicism in contemporary times, it almost feels like we attribute the name, right? We call someone a Stoic when they're not showing any emotions. Some people might say that they lack empathy. They might not have any emotions to begin with. But I think that this is a misconception, right? Because if we study what the Stoics are teaching us, it really is that it's not about not showing emotions. It's about not allowing yourself to be governed by these emotions, right? And funny enough, at the time, the true Stoics were the poets and the musicians that would perform on the public colonnade. So I think that it's funny that now we have this misconception of not being, not showing emotions, when at the time, the ones that were called the Stoics were the people that were probably showing the most emotions. And for all the Freemasons that are out there, at the time, this school of thought was actually called the philosophy of the porch. right? So we know that a porch plays a prominent theme in the Hiramic legend, and there's a lot to be learned from there and taught as well. But ultimately, as a school of thought, right, Stoicism deals with combating negative emotions and self-development. So next we have Epictetus. So Epictetus is the slave of our story. And again, not much is known from him. And there are conflicting accounts as to how it is that he was growing up. But in 50 AD, he was born into slavery in Hierapolis, Phrygia, which is present-day Turkey. Now, some accounts say that he was sold off into slavery from his parents. Other accounts say that he was born into slavery, right? But he was a slave under Epaphroditus, who was a wealthy freedman, and he was the secretary to Nero. And similarly to Zeno, he also wanted to become a student of philosophy, and he wanted to study philosophy. And he had asked Epaphroditus if he could study under Musonius Rufus, who was a Stoic teacher at the time. And Epaphroditus granted him that. He allowed him to be a student. And it was after Nero's death in 68 AD that Epictetus was freed, and he began to teach his own classes, much like Zeno had taught his own classes as well. Now, there are two works that remain from Epictetus, right, which are the Enchiridion of Epictetus, which translates to the Handbook of Epictetus, and we also have the Discourses of Epictetus. And the reason why we have these two works today is because of a student called Arian, who took it upon himself to verbatim copy all of the lectures that Epictetus was giving to his students, because he himself felt that Epictetus was as good as Socrates and as important of a philosopher. And in the Enchiridion, it's essentially a work that comprises 52 different aphorisms. And in the first aphorism, it's where we get what contemporary Stoics now say is the definition of Stoicism, right? So Epictetus teaches us in the first aphorism that some things are in our control and others are not. Contemporary Stoics like Ryan Holiday, if you're familiar with his work, he likes to say that that Stoicism, if it could be defined in one sentence, is you don't have control over the things that happen to you, but you have full control over how you react to them. And it was Epictetus's work, as handed to him by a tutor, that greatly inspired our next individual, Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome. He's the last of the 5 great emperors of Rome. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus was born in Rome in 121 AD. And shortly after, his father passed away, and he was adopted by his grandfather in 124 AD. Now, there's a lot of adoption when it comes to the way that Marcus Aurelius had grown up. So I had to keep some notes on the individuals. It was at 17 that Emperor Hadrian grew fond of Marcus Aurelius. So Hadrian was the emperor at the time, and he grew fond of Marcus Aurelius, and he actually called him Verissimus, which translates to the most true and faithful. It was after his grandfather's death that a man called Titus Aurelius Antoninus had adopted Marcus. And this individual who had adopted Marcus had been adopted by Hadrian himself. And it was after Hadrian had died in 138 AD that Titus took over as the emperor, right? But the reason why Titus had adopted Marcus is because Hadrian had seen in him what a great emperor needed to be. So that was going to be the lineage where it was eventually going to end up with Marcus being the emperor. And it was after Titus's death in 161 AD that Marcus did in fact become emperor of Rome. And it was during 161 AD to 180 AD, during his term as emperor of Rome, that he wrote what we now know today as the Meditations. These are his private journal entries, most likely never expected that they would be published, right? But now they're considered a seminal work when it comes to the Stoic philosophy. And it's in these private journal entries that he discusses his mortality, he discusses his relationship with himself, his relationship with others, he discusses the universe. A lot of times he'll just point out certain things that he saw that were meaningful to him, right? But similarly to Freemasonry, right? As we had said, that Freemasonry or speculative Masonry, has as a focus the inner spiritual building of the individual. Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics also argue that one has to build the, quote, inner citadel. So when we talk about the school of thought that is Stoicism, what is it that we're talking about? Stoicism involves itself in three different studies. So we have the study of logic, we have the study of physics, and then we also have the study of ethics. So when it comes to logic, we're told that knowledge is attained through the use of reason, and that it is the only way that we can gain true comprehension and conviction in our lives. Under the Stoic idea of physics, we're taught that the universe is God, but God is divided into two different classes. So we have what's called the active and the passive. So passive substance is considered anything that's matter or material, and then the active substance is anything that is fate related, or things that are left up to fate. However, ethics seems to be what Stoicism is mostly known for, and what a lot of the philosophers were preoccupied in studying. And through the ethical argument of Stoicism, we're told that one must discipline his perception, his action, and also his will. However, I think that the cosmological argument that Stoicism provides is very important in relation to the ethical argument that Stoicism is giving us. So Stoicism is considered a practical school of thought because it is presented as a way of life instead of a theoretical thought. The goal is to attain happiness by understanding that destructive emotions are the result of errors in judgment. To live a life of happiness, free from suffering, destructive emotions, and their negative effects, Stoics embrace the journey to become what they call a sage. And a sage is the individual that has moral and intellectual perfection. All individuals are viewed as the manifestation of one universal spirit. And we're also taught that we need to live in brotherly love, ever ready to help each other out. The cosmos is viewed as one expansive organism, which exhibits a complex, harmonious structure that is generated from a single divine principle that extends through all aspects of the universe, which also includes our minds. This is the principle that they call the universal reason. They called it God, and Marcus Aurelius in his private journals refers to it as Zeus. It's not meant to be understood as a supernatural entity or a transcendent being, but it's supposed to embody every fabric of our nature. Thus, they argue that to attain and live a happy life, one must subdue their passions, combat negative thoughts and emotions, and finally cultivate virtues. Now it's in the virtues that we find the first connection to the narrative that I'm going to talk to you about later, which involves the Ashlers, right? In book 4 of the Republic, Plato introduces to us the cardinal virtues that are 4 in number, right? So the 4 Stoic virtues are similar to the 4 Masonic cardinal virtues that we are taught in the Entered Apprentice degree. So the 4 Stoic virtues are wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. And the 4 Masonic cardinal virtues are fortitude, prudence, temperance, and justice. So fortitude is explained as the noble purpose of the mind that allows us to overcome any obstacles that we are presented with. Prudence is when we're regulating our lives in accordance to reason. Temperance is the restraint that we apply to ourselves to not allow ourselves to become governed by vices. And then finally, justice is the ability to give every person their just due with no distinction. Now, the connection that I make begins with the 3 movable jewels in Freemasonry. And the 3 movable jewels that we're introduced to are the rough ashlar, the perfect ashlar, and the tracing board. And I find it interesting that these 3 jewels are providing a story. Where you see the rough ashlar there on the left is supposed to represent man in his rude and imperfect state. The perfect ashlar is the ashlar that the fellow crafts have worked on after following the instructions from the designs on the trestle board or the tracing board that the master mason has left behind for them. And I find it interesting that if we take an individual who wants to become a true Stoic, a student of Stoicism, and we take an individual who wants to become a Freemason, right? If we take both of them as ultimately wanting to achieve moral and intellectual perfection, I think it's very interesting that for the Stoics, you have to do three things. So you have to cultivate virtues, you have to discipline yourself, and then you also have to live in harmony with nature. Similarly, the Freemason is taught that the process whereby the rough ashlar becomes a perfect ashlar is done through a virtuous education, the Mason's own effort, and the blessing of God. And then finally, if Stoics argue that happiness is acquired by attaining virtue, which they call excellence of character, similar to us, the way to attain excellency of character for the Freemason is by following the maxims and exercises that are also expressed in Freemasonry. So the first concept that I want to discuss with you tonight is the Stoic concept of premeditatio malorum. And I'm making a relation to seeing the Hiramic legend, the Masonic Hiramic legend, as a cautionary tale. So premeditatio malorum translates to the premeditation of evils. And Marcus Aurelius expresses this concept in Book 2, Entry 1, when he writes, "Say to yourself first thing in the morning, today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, aggressive, treacherous, malicious, unsocial. All this has afflicted them through their ignorance of true good and evil." So what premeditatio malorum teaches us is that every day we should wake up and visualize all of the difficult people that we are going to be dealing with, all of the bad things that could potentially happen to us, right? So that we're properly equipped to be able to face them throughout the day. I think that this perfectly aligns to seeing the Hiramic legend as a cautionary tale, because the Mason experiences this cautionary tale that depicts a betrayal from those closest, right? It's an initiatory experience. So the Mason is an active participant in the story. And with this depiction, the Mason is taught that we are all liable to a moral and ethical lapse of judgment. And this lapse of being, quote, ungrateful, aggressive, treacherous, malicious, can even lead figuratively to the death of those closest to us, especially brothers. However, in living a virtuous life and perfecting the inner temple, or, quote, inner citadel, we avoid having this lapse of judgment. And what I ask the Mason and the non-Mason to keep in mind is, especially now during this time, even at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody has social media. Everybody saw how brothers were referring to each other, how family members were referring to each other online, how best friends were referring to each other online. And I think that Freemasonry has taught us that those individuals, or that archetype of individual that we don't want to be, one thing that we should never overlook is that we are liable to become that person. And I think that it's great that Marcus Aurelius reaffirms this in Book 10, Entry 30, where he warns us, whenever you take offense at the wrong done by another, move on to consider what similar wrong you are committing. So next, I want to discuss the practice of self-control, and then I'm applying it to the square and squaring our actions. So in Book 6, Entry 30, Marcus Aurelius writes, "Take care not to be Caesarified or dyed in purple." He says, "It happens. Keep yourself simple, good, pure, serious, unpretentious, a friend of justice, God-fearing, kind, full of affection, strong for your proper work." He reminds us to strive hard to remain the same man that philosophy wished to make you. He says, "Revere the gods, look after men, life is short." And he warns us that the one harvest of existence on earth is a godly habit of mind and social action. Through self-control practice, the Stoics, much like Freemasonry, reminds us that we can't act impulsively. We have to avoid addictive behaviors. We can't overindulge in pleasures. And we also need to detach ourselves from luxuries. And I think that this perfectly aligns with the square, not only as a tool that reminds us that we need to square our actions with ourselves and other individuals, right? But it also happens to be the jewel of the worshipful master. And when it comes to having a position like that, I think that it's very easy for one to fall into a trap where they can become egotistical and let it get to their head, right? So I think that in keeping in mind that we have to control our practice and we don't have to be egotistical, like Marcus Aurelius says, don't be Caesarified. And it's important that he mentions, don't be dyed in purple. So at the time, because he was a very regal individual, I mean, he was the emperor of Rome, he had a robe that was purple, that determined and denoted that he was royalty. But it's in book 6, entry 13, that Marcus Aurelius writes, and he reminds himself, your purple-edged robe is just simply the hair of a sheep soaked in shellfish blood. So I think that it's very interesting that an individual who is arguably the most important, you know, he's the most important individual in Rome, is reminding himself, this is just the hair of a sheep, you know, that's been given a color just to denote my place in society. And I think that similarly, as a Freemason and as a worshipful master of a lodge, I'm always reminding myself that even though I do get a W next to my name and people do call me worshipful, there really is no higher title than brother. So next we have the Stoic concept of Amorphati. And Amorphati translates to love of fate. And what I'm applying this to is the tessellated floor that we find in the lodge. So it's in book 5, entry 8, that Marcus Aurelius writes, what happens to each individual is arranged to his destiny. We speak of the fitness of these happenings as Masons speak of the fit of squared stones in walls or pyramids when they join each other in a defined relation. Now, through my research, I had actually found that there were the Roman collegia who are considered the mystical Masons of the time. So most likely I'll be developing that information in another presentation, but I found that to be fascinating. But when we look at the concept of Amorphati as applied to the tessellated floor, I think that they perfectly align. You see the tessellated floor there on the picture when we were actually rebuilding our lodge room, because we had moved from another building. And just to give you some information, so the tessellated floor is supposed to represent the duality of life that has both good and evil as represented by black and white. The indented tassel is surrounding it, which reminds us of the blessings that always surround us. And then there's supposed to be a blazing star, which also represents divine providence that we are taught to rely on in all of our actions. And why I think that they both correlate is because we're taught that the tessellated floor represents the ground floor of King Solomon's temple. Now, not to give a little bit more away, but we know that that's a very important space for the Freemason. It's a very important space for a Freemason because of things that happen there. And it's important to note that we can't get away from the polarity. We can't get away from the white or the black. And Marcus Aurelius provides a great analogy in his private journals of what he means by loving your fate, whether it's good or bad. So he says that in book 4, entry 1, he details that whatever it is in agreement with nature, the ruling power within us takes a flexible approach to circumstances, always adapting itself easily to both practicality and the given even. He adds, it has no favored material for its artwork, but sets out on its objects in a conditional way, turning any obstacle into material for its own use. He concludes by saying, it is like a fire mastering whatever falls into it. He says that a small flame would be extinguished, but a bright fire rapidly claims as its own all that is heaped on it, devours it all, and leaps up yet higher in consequence. So many times it is very difficult for us to go through hardships, for us to experience certain things that we were not foreseeing, for things that we definitely did not want to experience. But at the same time, I believe that the tessellated floor and the Stoic concept of Amorphati are reminding us that we just need to use that as a fuel to our fire, right? To become the people that destiny has for us to become. And I wanted to point to Zeno's own journey, right? After he had experienced a shipwreck, because many years later, before he had died, and after he had created the school of thought that now A lot of people, I'm very thankful, are falling in love with and wanting to read more about. It was at the end of his life that Zeno is quoted as saying, "I now find that I made a prosperous voyage when I was wrecked." So next we have the Stoic concept of Memento Mori and the Chamber of Reflection. I just wanted to share this because it was a gift for my birthday that our senior deacon, Brother Matthew Ojeda, had actually given me. So it's a coin. I don't know if you could see it. It's a Memento Mori coin. And then on the back it says, "You could leave life right now." I'm going to add some more information about that now. So it's in book 2, entry 11, that Marcus Aurelius writes to us, "You may leave this life at any moment. Have this possibility in your mind in all that you do or say or think." I often find myself having conversations with individuals where they might ask me how old I am, and I might tell them, I'm 26, and they'll say, "Oh, you have your entire life ahead of you, to be able to do everything that you want to do." This really is wishful thinking, because we really don't know how much time we have on this earth. So I think that the Stoic concept of memento mori is teaching us and allowing for us to reflect on the idea of, who am I today? What decisions have I made? What decisions have I not made? Where is it that I'm going? Where is it that I want to go? And how is it that I can get there? And I think that the Chamber of Reflection perfectly captures that reflection on mortality. Although we don't use the Chamber of Reflection in the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, because we know that the Chamber of Reflection is very prominent in the Scottish Rite, there are still the 2 monitorial emblems that are found in the Chamber of Reflection that were introduced to in the craft degrees. And those emblems are the hourglass, which we know that represents life and how quickly we pass through it. And then we also have the scythe, which represents time and how everything is consumed by time, no matter the status. And I just wanted to add that, again, Marcus Aurelius showing us that it doesn't matter what status, what individual you are in society, death is going to come knocking one day, and we have to prepare ourselves for that. And we have to leave behind an important legacy, not only for ourselves, but for our community as well. It's in book 6, entry 24, that Marcus Aurelius writes, "Alexander of Macedon and his muleteer were leveled in death. Either they were taken up into the same generative principles of the universe, or they were equally dispersed into atoms." So essentially what he's telling us is that the queen and the pawn, after a chess game, the queen and the pawn go in the same box. It's not one individual that is going to receive better treatment than the other. And I think that both Freemasonry and Stoicism are actively asking us to give us that space. Although it might be difficult, they're asking us to reflect on that and to make adequate changes. And then finally, this is perhaps my favorite connection. It's the tracing board and journaling. So as I had already mentioned, the tracing board is where the Master Mason is leaving these drawings and these designs so that the fellow craft can follow them and turn the rough ashlar into the perfect ashlar. And I think that both of these are important because they call for us to become better individuals, in the sense that for us to develop conversations within ourselves. So in the world that we live in today, we're conditioned to meeting everyone else, but we're never directed to meeting ourselves. So I have to know how to court a significant other. I need to develop how I need to talk to a certain individual to get a job, or to get a recommendation letter for a better job, or for a school. But I've never actually taught in society how to have a conversation with myself. And I think that making a connection with journaling to the tracing board, they're both arguing the same thing, because journaling, much like Marcus Aurelius used it to address himself, I find it to be the call to adventure for the Mason to engage in a dialogue with himself. So Brother Winston Churchill was the prime minister, right? He actively journaled. And he once wrote that every night I try myself by court martial. to see if I have done anything effective during the day. I don't mean just pawing the ground. Anyone can go through the motions, but something really effective, right? So we see that Brother Winston Churchill is using journaling as a moment to audit himself and see where it is that he's at in life and what it is that he needs to make better, right? And I think that that the seeing journaling as the tracing board, right, allows us to see what it is that we need to work on by having already expressed it to ourselves, and then where it is that we want to take ourselves. And I think that someone that possibly made this connection way before I did is Brother Benjamin Franklin. So Brother Benjamin Franklin actually developed 13 virtues of his own that he wanted to adopt in his life. And he did this in his, I believe it was in his mid-20s. He writes about it in his autobiography. So he talks about attaining moral perfection. And in order to attain moral perfection, he felt that he needed to adopt and properly attain these 13 virtues. So the first virtue is temperance. He writes that one should eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversations. Order. Let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. Resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail what you resolve. Frugality. Make no expense but to do good to others or yourself, and waste nothing. He tells us to be industrious. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. Practice sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly. And if you speak, remember to speak accordingly. Justice. Wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Practice moderation. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. Cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, cloths, or habitation. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles or at accidents common or unavoidable. Practice chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring. Never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. And finally, much like Zeno had wanted to long ago, he says practice humility by imitating both Jesus and Socrates. Now, this is a page of virtues that Benjamin Franklin developed, where he had written the 7 days of the week and the 13 virtues that he wanted to attain and adopt in his life. Now, that what he was actively trying to do is, he said, I'm never going to be able to attain all 13 at the same time, but what I want to do is I want to practice each one. And then once I feel like I've attained this one, like temperance, I'll move on to the next one. And I think that this is so important because he mentions this in his autobiography. But the reason why he had even written his autobiography in the first place is because he wanted his son to have a manual that he himself could follow in order to attain moral and intellectual perfection. And I find this to be the equivalent of a tracing board for his son as the initiate of life. So to conclude, I ask all of you, how far are you from attaining moral and intellectual perfection? In our mentor's manual that's supplied by the Grand Lodge of Florida, a distinction is made between the Master Mason degree and the degrees of Entered Apprentice and Fellowcraft. We're told that in the first two degrees, architecture was the theme of our symbolism. In the degree of Master Mason, our symbols are of a different character. We're told that they speak of life, its tragedy, and its ultimate triumph if we're able to attain virtue. So I ask, the builders can only erect the lodge by using perfect ashlars. Taking this into account, how strong are our individual ashlars for not only our lodges, but also our communities as well? Thank you.
Worshipful Brother Molina, that was an excellent presentation, as always. You've already given us a lot to consider and ponder, certainly from the perspective of the Stoic and definitely from the perspective as a Freemason as well. At this time, I think we'd like to open up the opportunity for the folks who are listening, who have listened to your presentation, to ask any questions. So as Gino had outlined at the beginning, if you have a question you would like to ask Worshipful Brother Molina on this topic or any others, maybe raise your hand and we can identify you and unmute you so you can ask any questions.
All right, so one other point I'm going to make, Brother Molina, can you get off the shared screen so we can see everybody, so that I can see hands if we have, there we go, excellent. So again, great conversation and topic. Thank you very much for that. We have a question with Wes Reuter out at Refreshment, which is another podcast show, so shout out to them as well. Wes, let me just unmute you here. Hold on one second. All right, go ahead, Wes.
All right, thank you very much for the shout out, and very good presentation. I enjoyed it very much so. I just recently discovered Stoicism within the last year, and I found it to be very intriguing and very much in line with our Masonic principles and everything. But with our presenter, Daniel, is it? I'm sorry, I'm bad with names. I get a lot. Daniel. You mentioned Ryan Holiday. I discovered him, like him a lot. He mentioned most of the Stoics you should get off of the Penguin Classic.
Yeah, this is actually my copy of the Meditations.
Okay, but see, I was going to ask that because he suggested this one by Gregory Hayes. I don't know if you can see that one.
Right. That's a beautiful cover.
It's pretty good. Now, I got Seneca from the Penguin Classic. Is there another translation out there you would suggest other than the Penguin Classic? Because I know when it comes to letters of the Stoics, not all the letters are there, but they do make mention that they skip some because they're repetitive.
Right. The only one that I've read and that I use for my research is the Penguin Classics, and I really like it just because before the actual text, they're essentially giving you a ton of information of just Marcus Aurelius's life, his family, how he was dealing during the 14 years that they were at war while he was the emperor. So that's the one that I've just been using. I haven't read the Gregory Hayes one, but I'm very interested to pick it up.
I found it, well, it's the first one I read. I did read an e-version one, and that was a difficult read. I couldn't get through that. Right. But you never know what you're going to get with some of the e-books. So.
Yeah, I find with those books, some books I feel like I could read an ebook, but there are other books that, like, again, I want to be able to note and just like keep tabs on. So I'd rather just pick up the physical copy. But yeah, the Penguin Classics is the one that I've just been reading and doing research on.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions out there? Again, if you have a video on, you can put your hand up and we will call on you. If not, you can use the chat board for those who have just used their phone to log on today.
So we have a couple of questions on there, Gino, already on the chat board.
Oh, go ahead, because I don't see them.
One sec. We had a question here from Patrick Tessier to everybody. How has practicing Stoicism helped you for your year in the East? Do you find you've inspired your lodge officers to study the Stoic principles?
I want to say that I'm very happy that I became immersed in Stoic philosophy this year because I needed it, having to deal with the COVID-19 crisis has been very difficult, not only for me, but for the brothers of my lodge and the district, and I think Freemasonry as a whole. So I would definitely say that Stoicism has helped me in my year in the East. just because before I was an individual that didn't like to be reactionary when it came to hearing bad news or possible contention or something like that. And now I'm finding that if I wasn't doing it before, I'm definitely not doing it now. You know, I'm taking more time to actually think the process through before making decisions and bringing things up with other brothers. So I would definitely say that it has helped me out a lot.
Excellent.
I don't know if that answer suffices, but yeah. And
Thanks.
then I see another question there.
Yep, we got one. I'm just going to unmute. So, brother, worshipful brother Hearn, I think your mic is live. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation, worshipful brother Molina. Can a man who presents himself as a candidate for Freemasonry and asserts that he is a Stoic, can he be accepted as a Mason? Does he in fact have a belief in a supreme being? Can he answer the key 3 questions in a satisfactory manner?
Well, Stoicism is it would just be like an ethical school. So there's really no that I know of. There's no deity that you believe in. You know, so Stoicism really wouldn't fall under a religion. So that would most likely have to be, you know, based on whatever the brothers or the candidate's religion is. But Stoicism isn't a religion.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, worshipful brother Kern. That's great
Good
to see
question.
you as well.
That's a great question.
Yeah, we for those who don't know, we had worshipful brother Kern on the show recently, and he was discussing the work and research that he did on the Master's emblem. So great book that he has written, and some incredible research that he shared. So you can check out that episode on the first 3 knocks, and you can also go on mastersemblem.com. Is that correct? I think I got that one right. Yeah, we got it right. But great topic if you want to further your Masonic education as well.
All right, we do have a question on the chat board. And where do you believe Stoicism fits into leadership? You mentioned this was your initial incentive. So what has made the difference for you in regards to decision-making, communication, organizing, etc.? What do you feel all leaders need to take from Stoicism?
I think that two of the concepts that I talk about in the presentation are the most important to me. So that's Memento Mori and then the act of journaling. So Memento Mori, I feel that it's important because you're reflecting on, at least for me, the way that I adopted is, I know that I'm not going to be here forever. So what decision am I making? Is it only a self-serving decision? Is it a selfish decision? Or am I making a decision that is the most utilitarian and one that is going to move us forward? You know, so it just puts into perspective the bigger picture of what the lodge is doing as a whole, you know, because it really isn't about me. It's about the lodge, in my opinion. And then through journalism, right? I'm finding journalism and finding journaling through Stoicism. I think that it's also helped me not only have conversations with myself that I never thought that I would have, that I find are very important to leadership because it exposes us to vulnerability, right? And I think that vulnerability is something that we don't really like to toy around with because it might make us feel bad. It might make us feel quote unquote weak, but I don't think that that's the case. And I think that that journaling has actually helped me tackle maybe certain things that had been unaddressed. And in addressing them, I think that I become a better individual for myself, in a relationship with myself, but also with the community that I have around me. So I would just highlight those two, Memento Mori and then journaling, as being, I guess, the 2 takeaways for me and leadership.
Yeah, I especially like the piece that you brought up on Winston Churchill. I think it was around auditing yourself.
Yeah.
Having that conversation with yourself. Difficult skill to acquire and to practice as well. I think that's an excellent highlight from the
and I even find myself in journaling, you know, where I might have some entries where I say, oh, I thought about doing this, I wanted to do this, and then another one might be, you know, I wanted to do the same thing, and after a couple of entries, it's like, well, why haven't I done it yet? You know, what excuses am I making up for myself when there shouldn't be any excuses at all? You know, so I think that journaling definitely helps you audit yourself, because if another person tells us, right, that's when we are on our guard is up. And it's like, well, you don't understand what's going on, you know, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and all of this. But when you're the one telling yourself, right, there's that realization where it's like, I'm realizing the mistakes that I'm making. I'm realizing the things that I'm not doing. Now, what am I going to do to change that? You know, and I think that that's why journaling is such a powerful tool for our daily lives.
break down the ego.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
definitely.
Well said. We have another.
We have another question. That's okay. Another question is, in your valued opinion or observations, how can the meditation in Stoicism be used to maintain harmony and prevent discordance, passion between brothers of conflicting opinions? Again, in Stoicism.
So I think that in reading the text, one thing I want to make a distinction where you're not reading the text as a chore, right? Or as a task that I need to do. You know, you're reading it because you want to get something out of it. And I think that in reading the text, you're seeing this individual who was an emperor, and he's becoming really vulnerable with himself. And he's breaking down these guards, and he's bringing up these, how can I say this, these insecurities and these doubts that we also have as well. And I think that it almost, you know, if the brother or the individual is reading it from that perspective, I think that it humbles you and it brings you on the level, right? Where if you're understanding these journal entries, even something like when he talked about his purple robe, you know, we would never expect an emperor to be responding that way. And I think that similarly, as a Mason, you read this text and then you go, okay, he was an emperor and he was asking himself, so what? Right? And it's the same way where it made me reflect, where it's like, okay, I have this ring, so what? What am I doing? How am I living up to the Masonic standards, right? And the standards of the last 300 plus years. So I think that, and this really falls on the brother wanting to go into the text from that perspective, you know. And one thing that I didn't talk about is that the Stoics always saw themselves as students. You know, they always saw themselves as students. They even thought that the Epicureans at the time that they disagreed with completely, they were still individuals that they were quoting and learning from, right? Because they wanted to just learn. And I think that the life of a Freemason, right, is you're ultimately just a student, right? Where I have to give a shout out to our senior deacon, Brother Matt Ojeda. He's always telling me, he's like, I feel like an entered apprentice. Like I'm a master Mason, but I wake up every day and I'm an entered apprentice. I'm still learning about the craft. I'm still learning about myself, you know? So I think that in short, it's going into the text, understanding that I am a student and I'm a lifelong student. And even Brother Manly P. Hall said that even in death, you're going to learn. You've never gone through that, right? So it's being a student.
All right, we have another question. Can you say that a person who practices Stoicism is a non-initiated Freemason by the way he lives?
No, because Freemasonry is it's an initiatic and experiential fraternity for a reason. I think that that what the distinction is, that it's an initiatic order where you have to experience, you have to go through certain things that all brothers have gone through, and have that, we have that shared understanding, you know. So I think that maybe when it comes to the ethical arguments, you could be living up to them, right? Because we've all heard that there are some brothers that aren't Masons, right? And then there are some that are not brothers that are Masons. We've heard that, right? But I think that
they may make a great candidate though.
Right. But I think that the distinction is that it's an initiatic order. You have to go through it and have this experience in order to have this this understanding that I don't think that the Stoic has.
Okay, there was just a mention, if anybody is aware of a website called dailystoic.com, they send out daily emails on Stoicism. So that's something that I guess folks can check out. We haven't visited it yet, so we don't know what content's there. So it's, again, use at your own leisure.
Yeah, I get the emails. I get the emails daily. It's
Yep.
like every day the website sends you like a small little essay. It's like 500 words, and it's applying like Stoic concepts or themes to an issue going on right now. Like for example, when the pandemic first started, right? Marcus Aurelius actually died during a plague. You know, he had died during a plague that was named after him, if I'm not mistaken. It was called the Antonine Plague. So when the pandemic first started, a lot of the articles were dealing with how to deal with anxiety and then how to deal in the midst of a pandemic. So very interesting stuff.
All right, I think I saw Wes. Was your hand up again?
The
All
MVP.
right. There you go.
The MVP.
Your mic is hot.
All right. Yeah, you mentioned Daily Stoic. I get those emails. They're really good. I would suggest anyone that's interested in the subject to sign up for it. They'll give you like the Daily Stoic 7-day pack to get you started. Just to let you know a little bit more about it, but that's really good. Question though, I do have a couple, but what are your thoughts about, do you think, Stoicism gets a bad rap because of the non-emotion?
I think it does.
Deal?
Yeah, I think it does get a bad rap because I think that it's almost become, it's like a caricature, right? Where it's like, oh, he or she's acting stoic, they're not showing any emotions. But I feel like once you start reading these texts and understanding the lives that these individuals lived, it wasn't about not showing emotions. It was about understanding your own emotions, how powerful they are, and not allowing yourself to be governed by them because of what can happen, right? Where, like, I'll give a perfect example where I could have an argument with someone, right? And then I go to my journal and I write about it. And I say, man, I can't believe this person said this and this happened. And, and then as I'm writing it out, I'm rationalizing what's going on. And it gets to a point where it's like, why am I even acting like this? Like this really wasn't such a big deal, and then I arrive to that conclusion, right? But we all know that, when it comes to emotions and conflicts and things, things can go south quickly. We know that we've found ourselves in that position, or we're reading it on social media, or we're experiencing it in person, so it's having that understanding that, I don't need to react like that, right? This was out of my control, but I can totally use this as a learning moment, where I always like to tell people there are no failures in life. It's just an initiation into greater mysteries, right? So that's almost like, it's like using it to your advantage. So yeah.
Right. I looked into it. Well, I thought, I'm like, man, I thought like this most of my life. Not exactly, but I'm like, I thought about these things and stuff. So that came to it, but it's really helped me with, reevaluating my own life, because, it's up to me. If I want to be offended, well, that's up to me.
Right.
I decided that I was going to be offended, because anybody can say anything or do anything to you. Does it really matter what it is? And all this stuff just really blew my mind. But I know there's probably a couple other questions out there, but if anybody out there knows me, I'm a little bit of a Star Wars geek. But do you see a similarity between the Jediism and Stoicism?
Definitely.
I mean,
Definitely, and that's part of it. It's great that you brought that up, because that's amazing. And there's definitely like a, what was that?
But because it was just one day, honestly, that's how I got all into it. I was thinking all this stuff, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. It wasn't George Lucas that wrote Yoda. I'm sorry, love you, George, but I don't think he wrote it. And then find out he didn't. It's somebody else. And it was based off of Stoicism and Taoism. So
well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You know, that even that there are even a lot of similarities between Freemasonry and Star Wars, right? Where we have the Padawan and the Master Jedi, right? So we have these the 3 degrees are there. You know, we're just seeing them in being presented from a different perspective. But I would say that there are definitely a lot of similarities between Stoicism and Star Wars, and also Freemasonry and Star Wars as well.
That's great. I want to take a moment here. I noticed that we have Brother Joe Grabowski on the line from Amity, the Amity app. And
hey guys, how's it going?
Oh, awesome!
Thanks for joining, Joe. Great seeing you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I really appreciated Worshipful Molina. Your talk's been very great and educational. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
I too am wearing my first 3 Knocks shirt.
I think there's a few of us. Yeah.
Sorry, mine's in the wash.
For anyone that doesn't know, Joe is from the Amity app, and if you don't have it and you're a Mason, you need it. It's the greatest Masonic app out there, and that's we didn't know he was going to be on here tonight, so we didn't prepare this, but it really is. You can find any lodge. If you go visiting wherever, you just look up closest lodge to you, and it gives you a list with their meeting nights and all that. And there's a whole bunch of other resources on there, so definitely check that out if you haven't done that.
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot.
No problem. It's expected when you come on to our podcast.
Sounds good.
All right, we have another wall question. If we can get to that one, does Stoicism help you better understand the cardinal virtues?
I think it does, because it's almost like a deep dive into it and how to apply them into your life. You know, which I also think is the same thing that Masonry calls for. You know, the only thing is that now you're viewing it from the perspective of individuals that weren't Masons, but that would have probably been Masons. You know, and what a great thing. Like, really think about this, right? Where we make where we say that, you know, we have so many brothers that come from different backgrounds, right? Different nationalities that are Freemasons, right? And what are we seeing here with Stoicism, right? Where the story starts with a merchant. We end up with a slave whose writings influenced Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome. You got what I'm saying? So it's definitely even from that perspective, where it's like you're seeing a lot of connections between the two. So I would definitely say that it does help me better understand the cardinal virtues, because it's almost like a deep dive. Like it's pointing the finger and telling you, like, apply them to your life, know them, inherit them, and internalize them.
Excellent. Maybe we could take one more question here. I see we've got one more on the board. What distinctions, this is from Brother Ivan Parrish, what distinctions can be made between a proper practice of Stoicism in contrast to apathy and nihilism?
First up, shout out to my brother Ivan Parrish. You're great. I would say that, you know, nihilism, you're at the bottom, right? Where it's like nothing matters. You know, I don't care about anything. I don't care about anyone. And I almost feel like it's almost like the seesaw that you're on, right? It's I feel like Stoicism is the balance, where you might find yourself getting to that point, but Stoicism, what is it that Stoicism is telling you? It's in your control. It's totally in your control. You know, you can move to the other direction. You know, so I almost find like Stoicism is the guard from you ending up having a nihilistic outlook in life.
Very well said. Very well said. Worshipful Brother Molina, we thank you greatly. We appreciate your heart, your time, and your dedication to this topic. It is very closely aligned to Freemasonry. I think it's safe to say that we're all better for having heard your presentation, having the opportunity to reflect on it. I'm sure we will be sharing this on our website and our Facebook page. Is that correct, Sprotty? Putting you on the spot.
Not YouTube, though. We're going to keep
Not
it
on YouTube. No. That,
No, we'll probably throw it up on YouTube too.
You know,
very-
and I just want
Just
to,
for Wes. Just for Wes.
I want to thank you all. You know, even though I said this on the podcast, I still need to reiterate. It's amazing. It's such an honor and a privilege to be able to go from, you know, a year ago listening to you all at the gym on while driving, you know, and then to now being able to provide these presentations, working with you all. Like, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us. And Brother Scovio, I'm going to put you on the spot as the junior warden of the Rising Sun Lodge, number 129 in beautiful, historic Aurora, Ontario, Canada. How about the junior warden's toast?
Well, as we say, everybody, guests, brethren, ladies, gentlemen, everybody out here tonight, it's always happy to meet, sorry to part, and happy to meet
Happy
again.
to meet again.
Cheers,
Thanks, everyone.
everybody. Thanks for attending.
Thank you so much.
Be
Be
well.
well.
Thanks, worshipful brother.